Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you for the really nice introductions. I had prepared some introductions, but I don't need to give them. I will leave it to us to share our thoughts. So an exit may be something that you kind of think about as a very far off eventuality. Obviously, everyone aspires to a successful exit, but there's a journey to get there. And we thought today we would obtain some insights from people who, and I think the notable thing about the entrepreneurs on the floor here today is that they are serial entrepreneurs who have full experience of the exit scenario and have also supported other businesses with exits. So I guess my first question is really, a successful exit is the ultimate goal. Maybe a lot of the people in the room here are sort of, on the journey, perhaps not, extremely far down to, where an exit is an immediate scenario. To what extent is it important for startups to plan early and organize and mobilize themselves early with an exit in mind? Maybe Mitchell, if you'd like to say that first.
Yeah, sure, I can start. I think that it is important to have an idea of where you want to take the business. One thing I'd say is that fundamentally, if you build a good business with good profit and good revenue, someone will buy it. So I wouldn't be too concerned about thinking, we have to sell this business, this is who we're going to be selling it to, this is how much we want to sell it for. It's good to have the thought, but I wouldn't let it dictate how you run the business early on. I think the only thing I would say is that one of the main reasons why people struggle to sell their business is because it's too dependent on them. So when you're starting out early, I would think about how can I detach myself from this business in the long term. So obviously at the very beginning, you're all probably running it on your own, maybe you and a co-founder. It's impossible to detach yourself, but over the course of the business, you need to think about how you can do that. And that's kind of the number one reason why people would struggle to sell a business. So that's the only thing I would say.
You. Sami?
Sure. So, part of the stuff that was mentioned, that 4 of the startups I already invested in exited. And we as well, I used to run an accelerator, we exited, so we got acquired. And the thing is, when we invest in very early stage startups. So at that point in time, you want to see that these people are very ambitious and they have a long-term plan. Not always necessarily that they are talking about exit day one. That said, if you're starting a business and you want to think down the road what's going to happen and how you're going to grow it, there are multiple scenarios that you can pursue like day one. One of them is actually doing something and targeting a potential exit from day one because you know that there is a gap that you're filling that someone else would want to acquire and go for it. And in many other cases, you just have seen an opportunity that's huge, a market gap that no one is filling the right way, and you feel you have the right potential to fulfill it. And these are kind of 2 different roles, I would say. The first one is one that maybe is clear in terms of how to go after potential acquirers, even from day one, and position yourself. The second one could just go to become something much bigger than you thought it is, and then you can go public one day and other things. So in terms of the different modes of exits eventually that would arise longer term, it's not always clear day one, and it's not always a necessity to kind of put yourself in that mindset when you start, but definitely something that investors want to see at some point, not necessarily at seed stage, but maybe down the road when you grow bigger and you're reaching out to growth stage investments, Series B+, that's where maybe it becomes much more realistic to kind of put your head at it and see, okay, where I'm going to go in the next 5 years and how I'm going to actually exit or make this a next big thing somehow.
Thank you. Irrespective of what your idea is or how far you are on that journey, at some stage or another you will exit, whether it's because you retire or because the business is ready for it to move on. The absolute key is to make sure that you've got things organized. And that means, whether it's those early stage investors that you brought on, whether it's the agreements or contracts that you've put in place, it's making the job for people like Babita, when she comes in to help you sell the business or exit the business, a lot easier. And for me, the most important thing, whether you've identified, as we were saying earlier, the prospective acquirers, and you're building a story alongside that, or you just want to make sure that everybody who's part of the business has got their stake in it sorted out, making sure that you've got your data and information about your business all collated and sorted from day one, or as early as you wake up to the fact that things are going to get complicated, and they will. The sooner you can start putting that stuff into some sensible place and getting it organised is going to make your journey to the exit far smoother. When you get to that exit point, it'll make that process of the exit smoother. But it will also, as you start pulling stuff together, help you identify who might be relevant or interesting people for your business, for your idea, and start sharing with people way beyond the time that you even contemplate the exit. Because you'll be surprised at just how much people want to know about the business, not just several months, but maybe even years before you've started.
I'll actually just follow on from that, Ifty. So as Ifty mentioned, we often sort of encounter businesses that we are starting to support where things are kind of in disarray, to be honest. And it's not because consciously businesses have chosen to do that. It is because founders have finite time and resources. And they often tell me in response to me saying, oh my God, how is this even the way it is? They'll say, well, look, I didn't have time, I didn't have the people, I didn't have the money. And I had to make a choice about what I was going to devote my time to. Was it going to be building the business, or was it going to be minding my paperwork? And I chose building the business. So, I guess the question is, firstly, how do you see the possibility of balancing the two? And do you have a view on the relative importance of the two?
For me, Babita, it actually clears your mind. Knowing that you've got all this stuff organised and you've got a place that you can put it, it actually takes a cognitive load off you. Because as you're going through, there will be a 1,000 things that you need to keep a track of. There are enough tools out there. We're going to plug Vested anyway as a notion here, but there are many other tools that will help you just organise your stuff. So please use that. Get onto them as early as you can, because even it's the new big filing cabinets. You will lose documents. You will lose very, very important data on your journey. The sooner you just get that place started and just start filing stuff. We call it the data room on the Vested platform, but just start putting stuff in the right place such that when it comes to even a prospective conversation with an investor or an acquirer, you can share your stuff with them and you can actually build your story. Every exit is around a story. Every business is around a story, but the clearer you can get that and the smoother you make that journey, because the number of people who end up missing the bus because they didn't have their stuff sorted is lots of them.
Thank you. Sami, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess, so a couple of things here. If I were to structure my mind around it, there are probably 2-3 very important things day one, and many founders miss on those, especially because they're starting, they're still a bit maybe vulnerable and weak, trying to find out their way, get to product market fit very fast, and they miss on some of the most basic things that maybe are obvious, but I'm going to repeat them because I guess it's very important for founders to keep that in mind. First, do have things in writing between you and your co-founders and your investors and everything. Don't rely on that trust, even if you've known them for all of your life, for 20 years or more. Things go wrong when they're not in writing and we're not discussed. Have those hard conversations early on. Don't say, oh, no, he's my best friend, nothing will happen, or he's my brother. Sometimes it's family involved, nothing will happen. Like, think of the, Puma story and how the two brothers separated to create two companies. That's, I think, number one thing I would tell every founder, to really have the hard conversations, have things in writing, and then kind of discuss them upfront to their co-founders, their investors, with their supporters. Second, I believe it's very important to surround yourself with the right people, whether they are advisors, whether they are at some point lawyers. You will need lawyers. Don't think of that as sunk cost and unneeded. I think we underestimate how important it is to have the right shareholder agreements, to have good lever, bad lever clause, to have the right kind of things structured correctly so that when something happens, I don't know, maybe someone's get hit by a bus, what do you do? So all of these kind of things are very important to have them figured out, and surrounding yourself with the right advisors, people who have done previous exits, good lawyers, and these kind of folks is very important, even if you have to pay for that early on. And I guess the third one, and this is kind of to complement the first two, is that once you're starting off and you want to organize yourself and maybe make your life easier at some point, it's very important also to document things and to be very well aware of where the data sits, where the contract sits, where the conversations happen. You have the right CRM to have the right, all kind of things. Having the right tools and having the right combo of tools without overcomplicating your life. Again, it might sound for someone who's trying to run very fast early on that that's a waste of time. Believe us, it's not. It's something that helps you much more down the road, helps the people you're going to work with. Once there is an exit opportunity or you want to take this somewhere further, you'd have things lined up very fast and you can make faster decisions and more informed ones if you have all of these figured out early on.
Yeah, I agree with everything these guys have said, but if the question is what should I prioritize, running the business or organizing my documents, the answer is run your business. Fundamentally, a lot of the problems that you could start with if your paperwork isn't in order or your finances aren't quite in order, you can solve them before you get to an exit. Now, that's not me saying don't do those things. It's just if that's genuinely your decision, then run the business. I can actually tell a bit of a story about the Fanbytes exit. So when we were going through the process, we realized that our accounting was an absolute mess. And we hold our hands up. We were all like, 20, between the ages of 20 and 24 when we were running this business. We didn't really know, none of us had accounting degrees. So when we came to do the due diligence with the acquirer, they basically pulled us up on it. And they were like, your EBIT, your profit figure is just not right. It is kind of way off. So even at that stage, we were able to rectify the issue and fundamentally sort the deal out. But if we hadn't had the business, we wouldn't have even been in that situation. So although, yeah, all the stuff is super important and there's platforms out there to help you, I think the biggest piece of advice that I really agree with is get good advisors on, because when the advisors kind of noticed this issue as well, they were just on it and they solved it within a matter of like a couple of days. So that's kind of the biggest thing. So I wouldn't stress about it. There's so many things to stress about during your first year of business. I wouldn't be there worrying about, oh, I've lost that contract. Where's the signature? Where's all my finances? Just run the business and keep it in the back of your mind, but don't stress about it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. I think the priority should always be running your own business. If you can keep things tidy along the way, that's great. It's a plus. All right, well, moving on to something else that's of critical importance, I think, for every founder is investment. So my question to whoever wants to take it first is really, at what stage in the journey? Is there a right time to take on external investment or a wrong time? Or do you have any view as to, whether you should take it at all, or, whether you should get a whole supportive group of people there up front? And any perspectives on that?
I think I'll jump on that one, since I've really seen many startups wanting to fundraise very quickly, and it's not always the best decision. So I think starting the business and then figuring out the next stages of investment, growth, and product building. And I align with you on, I think number one, you should be running the business, not all the other stuff, that's for sure. The other stuff are just kind of extra to have early on. The kind of fundraising journey and how the entrepreneurs need to look at it is the following. So you're starting to build something, you want to validate that it works first. You want to validate that there is a need for it, that the problem you're trying to solve for is not only your problem, is a problem that many others have. I think that's crucial before even looking to any investor. And in terms of how you think about it step by step, it's gonna depend on your execution and your needs, because ideally, each round of investment should last you for 18 to 24 months. And you should not be losing tons of equity early on because you want to keep some control until you reach maybe Series B in a way. So if you think about those and the number of rounds you're going to go through, it's not too much room that you have until you reach that stage. So thinking about it in terms of, okay, do I have enough validation that's going to work? Do I have enough traction? And do I know what I need to do next? Is crucial before even getting your first round. Now, ideally, again, surrounded by the right people and having kind of the right advisor around you would help you figure out that key moment in time for your first round. That usually is, many people call it FFF, friends, family, and fools. But then after that, and after those people who are very close to you believe in you, this is when you can start looking at more serious investors like angels or super angels, or eventually venture capital funds and other kind of investors you might find on the journey. But it's very, very important that you figure out what you're trying to do as fast as you can. Try to execute as much as possible before you get into the fundraising, because that would get you much more leverage, much more better valuations for sure, and more visibility on how you're going to run the next 18 months.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess just building on what Mitch was saying earlier, and just for the avoidance of doubt, running the business has to be the number one priority. What I was talking about is just taking some of that cognitive load and distraction off you. When it comes to investment, I think that the key, I know a lot of people think, just run out, go get money, but the point that Sami has made is diluting yourself down too early, too quickly, at a much higher risk is something that you want to try and avoid. So you should, I would argue, go as far as you can in terms of bootstrapping and take on the additional capital when you are ready. Taking on capital when you absolutely need it will put you in a weaker position, because if you've done the friends and fools round and then you've already brought a few people onto the team, you're then in a place where you're desperate for the additional funding. Being in that place is not the best time to go out and search for capital or additional funding. But be mindful of just how much you really need to take on. People often think, take on as much as I possibly can. Not necessarily, because the more you take on, the more dilution you will necessarily take. So I would try and be as cautious as you can in terms of how much you take on. Be mindful that there will be other dilution steps in the future that you're going to have to accommodate in your round. So, yeah.
I think I'd say not every business needs to raise money. There's probably a bunch of people in this room who run businesses that just fundamentally don't need to raise large amounts of cash in order to be a successful company. You know, if you run an e-com brand, you drop ship products on Shopify, you don't need to be going out and trying to raise large VC funding to do that kind of business. If you want to build a tech platform and your goal is $1 billion exit, then you probably need to go and raise some money. So I think very carefully about the type of business you want to run, and that dictates where you want to take your funding journey. You know, the friends and family round, that's kind of like the early stage. Many businesses might start with that. You could raise anywhere from like £10,000 up to a couple of £100,000. For a lot of businesses, that would be more than enough. And I'd be careful if you want to enter into the VC world without fully understanding what you're getting into. When you enter into a VC conversation, their expectations of where the businesses are going are very high. In fact, with my latest business, Searchland, we went out for VC funding, and on our deck, we want to achieve a £150 million exit in the next, I can't remember how many years, I think it was 3 years or something, 5 years maybe. And immediately the VC was like, that number's nowhere near big enough. That number's got to be $1.5 billion if you want us to invest. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me, because that's just not how I'd been thinking about the business. And you can fall into a trap if you do that, because you take on that money and you think, okay, right now I've got to make this a £1.5 billion business. Can my market even sustain that? Like, is that the kind of business that I want to build? And then you get into all these other issues around preference stacks. You know, we've taken on £4.5 million. All those investors, if we sell the business, they get paid back first. So, you know, and then as you start raising more and more money, you know, I've got friends who've raised 50, 60 million. If they sell the business for 60 million tomorrow, they make no money. So like, imagine doing that. You've raised a load of money, you've built a successful company, and then you can't sell it because you're behind all these preference stacks. So I'll be very careful about going crazy with your raising and just think and be really conscious about the type of business that you're trying to build.
So Mitchell, just leading on from that, you've described one, but are there any absolute no-nos when dealing with investors from your perspective? Is there an example that you have of something that's just gone drastically wrong because of a decision that a founder's made?
I think that the biggest one is preference stacks and some clauses like that in contracts. So what a preference stack basically means is that you get paid back first, and typically it'll be 1x. So if you raise 5 million quid, you sell the business for 5 million, all of that goes to investors. But sometimes investors will try and put 2, 3x on the liquidation preference, and then you raise 5 million, sell for 15, and you might still not make any money. So things like that are super important, and there are other examples of things in contracts where they might try and sneak in a few extra clauses about their rights to refusal and different things they can do. But fundamentally, just get good advisors on your side and don't trust their lawyers. Get your own independent advice when raising a round. But that's my main advice.
Thank you. Guys?
So I guess also some of the other things to look at in term sheets. And to also iterate a quick point on VC money. So once you get VC money, you're under the hook, you're under pressure, and it's different than the FFF money. So that's something to keep in mind when you're discussing with VCs. Is that something you want, and when do you want it? Just to double down on that quick point. And to highlight some of the no's, I guess, looking at the term sheets, seen many of them, many investors try to put veto rights on stuff that should not be part of their mandate or decision. They try to take sometimes board seats, and they're not even the lead investor, they haven't put a large amount, or they haven't done anything crazy for the business. And this is where things get tricky, because first you're under the pressure of the VC money and they want you to see executing in a certain way, and then they try to take more control over the business. And I've seen startups fail just because they've given up too much too early of such kind of rights. So that's some of the no's. And as a founder, and if you're the CEO of the company as well, you have to keep in mind that it's your business, and whenever an investor is flirting with taking over your business, this is when you should push back. Maybe they're the wrong investor, and you should talk to your advisors and try to understand what's the best practice in that case.
I could not add further in terms of getting good counsel. Lawyers, having the right lawyers with you on your side when you go into those negotiations is absolutely key. People have lost so much. I mean, on the vested platform, we've had people where the VC liked the idea, and you've got a partnership, a husband and wife. Halfway down the road, they're on board. I won't use names, but Sheila, you need to tell Jimmy that he's not pulling his weight. And the amount of power that they can wield is just incredible. I've seen relationships be destroyed by the pressure put on by the VCs. So getting good counsel to make sure that on that journey you have not been disproportionately handicapped, so that you can indeed just focus on the business, focus on running up that hill, because it's going to be a steep enough hill anyway. So counsel, wise counsel, there's nothing like it, seriously.
I didn't prep them on this at all, by the way.
That's just absolute truth. It's my own journey.
I want to allow a little bit of time for the floor. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to. Oh, we have a very short amount of time. So one question. I see someone there. So having a bit of problems hearing you.
Yes.
You want to come up, Kufa? Oh, sorry.
Congratulations on exits and growing and scaling, etc. As a founder who's going through an acquisition process right now, what piece of advice would you give me?
That's a big question. Without much more context on the size of the acquisition and what type of business you run, all those kind of things, I think that what stage are you at? How far in? Very, very just started. Oh, very close to the end. Well, you're basically done then. I don't know what. Okay, I couldn't fully hear you. But I guess the only thing I would say then is make sure you read your documents very carefully. We had an earn-out in our acquisition, and you may well have an earn-out as well, yeah? So make sure you read those earn-out terms, because things may seem really rosy now. You're about to make, I don't know how much money, but a bunch of cash. And you're like, hell yeah. and then a year down the line, midway through your earnout, you've got some targets to hit, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know if I can swear. You might not hit them, so just make sure you fully understand those and be aware that you might lose out on a bit of cash, maybe.
So also, without knowing the full context and details, two things. One, definitely make sure you have a very good tax advisor. That's key in any exit. I cannot tell you how much. And I guess the second thing is try to, as much as possible, either yourself or with people who are surrounding you, emotionally disconnect and psychologically disconnect from this whole rush for the exit to make sure objectively everything makes sense. I think this I cannot emphasize enough.
I think as well as disconnecting from the process, it's also a disconnecting from the thing that you created. This was at one stage your baby, for want of a better phrase. You are going into a world now that it's not yours, and the people taking it on board, you have to recognize that they're going to maybe do different stuff with this. And that emotional disconnect, I mean, all the rest of it, good counsel, tax counsel, as well as legal, all of that is brilliant, but I think there's an emotional journey that you'll go through yourself, through the earn-out, at the end of the earn-out, that I think you just need to prepare for. A bit of Zen wisdom will take you a long way.
I'll just add to that. So on an earn-out, I think something which commonly is overlooked by founders is that there is clawback provision related to the earn-out, and they will try to, rid you of everything if they can. So I think that's something you need to look out for. Do we have time for one more? No? We're done? We're good? Thank you very much for hearing us.